you so much for joining us this evening. We'll keep this short and sweet because we know everybody wants to hang out, drink, have some yummy food, and of course, network. That's what we're all here for tonight. So I want to thank everyone for joining us this evening for the Web3 with a Purpose event. I can just tell you from the projects that I've been learning about tonight, saying purpose is definitely an understatement. It really is impressive, the diversity of talent and ideas that we have here tonight. My name is Jill Malandrino. I'm the Global Markets Reporter at NASDAQ, located right here in Times Square, New York City. So stop by and see us, 43rd and Broadway, with that big tower where you see all the advertising going on. So really the intersection of culture, innovation, technology, certainly the sweet spot for everything that you guys are focused on. I'd like to acknowledge we're very fortunate to have them here with us, the New York City Office of the Mayor, and we also have the Australian, British, and German consulate joining us here tonight. So just a special round of applause to have special guests with us. So a little bit of background for NFT NYC for those of you who might be new to it this week. And again, after going through a pandemic for 2 years and just watching the growth in the industry over the past 2 years, certainly looks very different than when it did when we first gathered here. And it's the 4th year. We have more speakers and attendees than ever. Jake, I think 22,000 coming in through Newark and through JFK. So really, 22,000 people coming back in is really, the coming out party to bring this back to New York City. It can be overwhelming. There's a lot going on. There's a number of events. There's 22,000 people for you folks to meet. So we really are honored to have everyone in this space tonight for a more intimate setting and get to know about your projects. And, I also want to give a special introduction to our purpose-driven ventures. We have One Earth Rising, Mycelium, and Civics Unplugged as part of my panel tonight. More specifically, Jan Roessner, he's the founder and CEO of One Earth Rising. We have Denny, head of growth for Mycelium, and Josh Thompson, the founder of Civics Unplugged. Gentlemen, it is great to have you with us. Let's kick off with a brief introduction. Jan?
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Jill. For the introduction and also for being here. It's an honor. So my name is Jan Roessner. I'm the CEO and co-founder of One Earth Rising. One Earth Rising is an entertainment and technology platform, and our focus is bringing the core gaming market to Web3. And within our DNA, we are, the vision is to really bring all the nerds all together and really make the world a better place. One game at a time. That's what we're working on. Thank you.
That's pretty hard to follow. I'm Jake Denny. I'm head of growth at Mycelium. We've been around since 2018 building infrastructure in the space. So we like to say we're the connective tissue for global digital markets, and we've been securing the chain link space with an Oracle for some time. So we're one of the top performing Oracles there. Front row seat to DeFi. So knowing sort of where that was headed directionally, we built and launched a platform called TracerDAO. Tracer is a derivatives infrastructure platform, enabling people to have access to risk management tools that they may not previously have had access to. And we also run reputation scoring for what people are doing on chain to give a little bit more insight into the human behavioral aspects of what people are doing, how they're behaving in this blockchain space. And the hope is by giving people more access, we can enable people to take a lot more of their financial freedom and be a bit more in control of their destiny.
Thanks. It's the nerds' time. I believe it. Are we going to do Q&A? We are, right? Okay, cool. So keep it brief regardless. I'm Josh. Very important. Thank you for the intro. I'm one of the co-founders of Civics Unplugged. There's multiple founders in true distributed fashion that we'll talk about. But headline is I'm the guy that every time starts a Web3 accelerator and venture fund, the market crashes. So pay attention to what I do. Like Biggie said, I've been in this since '92. Look at all the bullshit I've been through. I've been in this since 2012. Have a company builder, have a fund that invests solely in carbon and climate called Era VC and Era Force. At Civics Unplugged, we're the largest democracy building organization in the entire world. We're represented by 77 different countries, 50 different states. We're 76% young women, 70% non-white. I'll get to why that's important when I talk a little bit more about the impact of what we do. And we launched the Dream DAO because we were tired of fundraising on the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation's requisites and the Walton Family Foundation's requisites, who told us how to do our work, what it should look like. So we dropped an NFT, which is the most diverse NFT project in the entire world. So cool, happy to talk about carbon and climate and working with a bunch of young folks who are going to use this technology in a true form and fashion to make it more empathetic and humanistic. Is that the buzzword we're using?
Purposeful.
Purposeful.
So, Josh, it's funny that you brought up how we're seeing a lot of innovation in a bear market. And, I started off in institutional equity trading in 1998. So a little bit of a dinosaur in the room here. But, having been through the dot-com boom, having been through the digitization of the equity markets, April 2001 is when we converted to decimals. And I remember, I think it was April 21st. I remember it being a very specific day for us traders. Going through the financial crisis and transitioning into media, it's interesting because there's a lot of parallels with how trading and sell-side analyst research and media have transitioned with their digitization. And I think when we talk about bear markets, that's where you see innovation and new projects and new policy and regulation really start to form. So I think it's exciting. So I want to ask each one of you guys, when you think of web3, when you think of decentralization, and perhaps trend might be the wrong word, but when you think of how it's going to evolve and unfold, what does that look like to you?
Starting me. So for the gaming world, I think it's the most exciting time ever. We have never seen the ability before the tool sets that are given to us really now give the actual characters everything that you have played for many years. You have put so much money in. It's actually yours now. And this is something that has never really existed before. And we can include in this ownership also purpose. We can directly donate or we can directly divert funds into the pockets of the nonprofits that needed to do their work. All of these connections are now possible. So, I want to actually then in the future, hopefully very soon, we say goodbye to words like NFT, blockchain, everything. That's just our engine that runs all the good things that we can do. And as I said before, it's really there where all us nerds come together and can have a darn good time and do good in the world. It's amazing.
Yeah, I think on a broad sort of level, people talk about crypto and blockchain and Web3 and all of these things, and they throw it out. And I think one of the things that gets left behind is just, what does this mean for the internet as a whole? Like, this is the digitization of everything. It's been hitting lots of industries. I did that in the music industry, watched it just get steamrolled by digital. And I think when we look at that space now, as it visits financial markets, gaming markets, things like that, it's really interesting is, like Jan was saying, the ownership aspect of Web3, that's a really big difference. And not only that, just taking a bit of power and sovereignty back on the internet, the idea that information just continues to leak, people's identities, the biases that people are subject to from a lending perspective, from how they conduct themselves on the internet. It's controlled by a few entities. They don't adhere to any of the rules of any of the systems. They refuse to be broken up. And I think that change and what it represents with what crypto can unlock is a huge part of this. And then where it sort of fits into finance and gaming and all these huge things that has a big impact on society as a whole. And I think that's a really net positive. And I think that's part of the reason that we get motivated to build in this space is we want to see that change and we're going to build that.
Can I stop going last? No, it's okay. That's okay. All the good points are taken. So raise your hand if you bought a ticket on Ticketmaster in the past 4 years. Cool. Like what I hope evolves around our space is we stop talking about it. So I'm part of a company that actually built the underlying technology for Ticketmaster. So for the past 4 years, if you bought a ticket, it is that distributed technology is what's verified that it's a unique ticket that is not price gouged. Did you know that you're interacting with this technology? You didn't. I think we talk about it too much. So I think the evolution, right, is this whole idea, if we want to use acronyms and buzzwords, right, is a Web2 interface, Web3 background. Right now we're leading with, let's talk about Web3 all day long, right? Like that's just not really going to resonate. And where I really hope it evolves, my big belief in this space is that it is the ultimate truth teller, right? So I believe this is the ultimate trust economy in so many different ways. So to me, it's a something that we solved for where we evolved with the Dream DAO and Civics Unplugged was two things, right? Where people say they believe in the idea of diversity. Well, we launched this NFT project in this DAO, and we wanted to show on this immutable technology, when and where did you invest in Civics Unplugged in the Dream DAO, which is a youth-led, diverse community. Prove it. You can't take it down. It's a moment in time. So to me, this evolution that is the ultimate truth teller is something I'm super, super excited about.
So I feel like if we're talking about buzzwords, purpose, ubiquity are certainly the two that come to mind. And I think in this age of ESG greenwashing, being able to not just tick the boxes, but to actually show proof of concept and that you're working on it and you are being an agent of change and not just having a great comm story, but you're actually executing on it is what's most impressive to me. So speaking of execution, while we're here for NFT NYC, are there any specific news or events that you have on the horizon during the course of the week? We'll pass it to Josh first.
Pass. So is there anything that we're going to be attending?
News, announcements, anything you want to share that's specific to this week?
Yeah, I'm going to get really weird. I'll be at 8 Fest tomorrow night, said that out loud, and then later, after that, I'll be in a cape and a wand at the Illuminati party, if anyone's going. And then the next morning, I'll get to the point. Next morning, I'll be with an incredible organization. I'm not sure if they're represented here tonight. Reform, which is one of the largest criminal justice advocacy organizations, chaired by Robert Smith and Jay-Z, Sean Carter. The idea is just like this space is all over the place, right? There's so many applicable applications on it. But the most notable news that I will say is, as it relates to us, is season 2 of the Dream DAO and Civics Unplugged just launched. We did our original mint, which was about, 7 months ago, Tyler? Yeah. So we just reopened for this week. We did it at the last NFT NYC, and we're open. And majority of what you're minting into, one goes to the community, like I said, 76% young women, 70% non-white, and those funds go to web3 specific projects on young folks working on civic and systems work in their local community. So
Yeah, that's really cool. Well done. In terms of launching and what I think we would talk about is probably from the Tracer side. So we launched our version 2 of Tracer, and really what that does is I talked about derivatives and what that infrastructure looks like. Trading digital assets has been pretty commonplace, and we understand what that means. We're launching as well real-world markets. So about a week and a half ago, we launched the first oil market that trades 24/7, constantly on. And so, like when you look at the price of oil and the exposure to that from the individual perspective, you can go and you can basically create a position to go long oil and with leverage for $10. And if you're an Uber driver, that stuff matters. So outside of the United States for retail, this is a big opportunity for people to get this risk exposure at a really low cost. And so we're seeing this now start to trend in the direction we want to see these first markets come onto the blockchain. We can launch them really quickly. We had one of our devs spin up a market on his own in a couple of hours the other day. Now, this is normally something that costs tens of millions of dollars, requires a lot of liquidity and a lot of effort to launch, and he launched it in 2 hours on his own. So what this infrastructure means to the change of how people will protect themselves to this exposure is really exciting. So that's probably the exciting news from our front is Tracer's got this program called The Voyage. Over a period of weeks, we'll continue to launch these new markets and demonstrate what some of the power of this can really represent in terms of people taking control of their financial futures.
it's called The Voyage.
It's called The Voyage, yeah.
Wow, congratulations. So I can't really stop talking about the buzzwords yet. So we're working on that, trying to find some new language around that. But yeah, so it's an exciting week, month, and time to come for us. We, on the gaming side, for the last year, we have developed a new protocol on the NFT side, which allows you to actually own a full fleshed out game asset. And that in turn allows us now to move game assets between games and between all platforms. I mean, all platforms. That has been proven in our test case already. And we're moving this now certainly to the next stage very soon. I don't know if anyone of the Immutable X or Bitsky folks are here, could make it, but we're definitely also announcing our partnership with Immutable X and with Bitsky, the wallet system, because we want to bring a real seamless integration of anyone who doesn't even understand a little bit of the blockchain to bring them into the game world and connect that to NFTs and blockchain in itself. And with that, so really incorporating the purpose part of it as well, it really will this is our vision, change the world of gaming for good. That's the next stage. So this will be announced very soon, hopefully in the next week or two, as soon as we get the integration done. And then that's a new era for video games.
You just gave me the perfect segue to our final prepared question before we get into questions from the audience. But if you can give everyone one thing to walk away from through the lens of how are we as an industry evangelizing the use cases and the stories and what can be done with all this technology, because for the average person, to your point, educating on blockchain, what they see through mainstream media, we know what kinds of headlines get the clicks, but what can the industry be doing how can we be working, whether it's with academia, whether it's with students, whether it's with governments, whether it's with established companies, to make them understand what is possible with all these different underlying technologies. It's not just about a store of value.
All right. So definitely, I mean, what we just talked about, the help to help somebody who's just new to the space, and that was me like a couple of months ago, to understand the technology environment and really educate in that. And so everybody who helps to break down the barriers to enter the web3 space, or however you want to call it in the future, that is really the group, the person, the individual that helps the space incredibly, because it is the future. And if I look at my own industry, the gaming industry, everybody is so skeptical about NFTs and blockchain for good reasons. And the same is true in our other vertical, the comic book IP environment. So nobody really has trust in it because what happened in the past. So we need to educate, we need to break these barriers down to really make the best use case of the technology. And then with that, really support the purpose-driven engagements and activities that we have. Specifically for us, our demographic, target demographic, Gen Z and millennials are the same people that are so passionate about social impact. So we can bring this all together and really have the biggest impact of all.
Good man. Thank you. Is Zoe here from ZX Ventures? I think I saw her. So what's up, Zoe? Hey, if you don't mind, I'll reference you in this. So yeah, all the things you said. So I love this question. So yeah, obviously we're living out this thesis of working with Generation Z, most notably not working with or working down, like they're building these tools, right? That's our whole ethos is we're investing directly off the balance sheet into them doing these things, right? This is their technology. And then also with like the bigger brands, Zoe represents ZX Ventures, which is like Budweiser, right? Yeah, Stella, all those things. Like they've done some pretty cool projects in the space, but they're open-minded and they're engaging, with one of our entities, right? Of like, what's the longer term map, right? ZX Ventures and Budweiser has access to over 200,000 farms across the world, over 2.5 mom and pop bars and pubs across the world. Like, forget the Dwayne Wade NFT drop. What does that mean? Like that overall technology. So kind of bringing this young generation and working with these legacy corporations, that's where the magic's going to be. And from an impact side, I'll say something that may be, I guess, a little off brand, but it's just something I'm saying out to the space is just it's the trust economy and truth economy. Be honest while you're building these things. Civics Unplugged existed for well over 3.5 years with thousands of young people. We have a core tree trunk of a community. We tacked on a Web3 DAO as a tree branch. If we didn't have that core community, it just would fall, right? So all these projects that are like, I'm just here for the community, I'm just here for the vibes, and everyone's like, what's the floor price? How can I make money? It's okay to come here for floor prices and to make money. I have a big mantra, like the reason you show up is not the reason you stay. But if you hoodwink me of like the reason why we're all here, this technology will surely out you.
Yeah, really good point. I think one of the things that I find quite fascinating from having been in around the space for a number of years is just the credibility. And I think you look around. I mean, we've got 3 great country representatives here with the consul generals, deputies. So thanks for coming and joining us. Jill, you here with NASDAQ. Like these big brands I can see in the room, friends from KPMG in the back. Laszlo, thanks for coming and joining us. And we've got Paul here from the Australian Stock Exchange. These are institutional entities that people know globally and respect. And the fact that they're here at these events and talking about this, I think that's something that you really need to pay attention to. Go back a few years, and I don't think that was the case. So I think the people who can see the future are the people who should build the future. And so, that room that we have really put together tonight is full of those builders. And I think that's, there's a vision there. We need to keep executing and, staying true to sort of what's there and, don't trust, verify, like these ethos around how we sort of build community and sort of commit to this openness and transparency and transforming industry is really going to be an exciting path. And yeah, thanks for having us.
All right, we actually managed to stay on time here. We have time for like 4 or 5 questions. This is awesome. So who wants to kick off with a question? Don't be shy. Oh, in the back.
Yeah, I'll ask a buzzword bingo. Can you say where you're from or who you are?
Come up and,
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're listening. Well, I see it's Esther. Okay. Aussies don't. I wasn't expecting that. Like, question from the back, very different. I've got my merch bag. Thanks, Tom. Transparent. Yeah. Buzzword bingo question from Consensus last week, Web 5. and just views on that in terms of the power it could have for social impact if we do start looking at the world in that way, and having common technology around identity. So I'm very curious about that in the context of social impact. What happened to Web 4? Could you repeat the question? It was just the buzzword bingo of Web 5 and the impact of that for purposeful investment.
I think the buzz and the drop around it is part of the meme. Jack Dorsey's playing games here as well. He's good at attention games, and that's part of it. So taking Web 2, which we're very familiar with, it's the web that he's really famous for with Twitter, and then taking on this Web 3, which really hasn't proven itself. It's not a thing, and creating Web 5. So I think there's a little bit of buzzkill around that with the intention, but on the specific part of the identity, I think that's a really interesting part, and we're doing a lot of work around this and research papers around zero knowledge proofs with KYC. And I think this is going to be incredibly important, particularly for financial industries. As Paul, who's here, will attest, you can't really get some of these trades to occur at a macro level if everything's on chain, because people can front run, they can know your positions, and it doesn't really work from a financial perspective. So that's one aspect, an incentive to do it. And the other part is people should have their privacy online. It should be our right to be private and forgotten online. But that stuff just leaks out the back of these big conglomerates all day long. And so identity is going to be critical for us to solve, whether that's an NFT or a token or something else, soul-bound tokens like Vitalik talked about. You can check out that Bankless episode on that, strongly recommend it. But if you want to really understand what that means, the idea that you can't transfer it and it has this sense of identity, there are a lot of shortfallings that we need to work out, but the technology's there, and that's something that I think is really important for the future of everybody when it comes to identity online.
I'll be brief. I have no idea what you're talking about. I was at Consensus. I did a very different route. I put up a couple pins and said, we have some capital that we want to deploy. Who's building stuff that no one at a conference is talking about? So I spent all my time on the side of that. What fucking 5? And again, this space, y'all, we're trustless. Does anyone want a trustless thing? That's like the worst branding. Web 5. This is crazy.
Yeah, I'm totally with you, Josh. So I'm happy that I just understood Web 3. So I'm not there yet. However, it's definitely to just.
I'm open to it.
Whatever it is, it sounds amazing. It's definitely talking about identity. There's one big challenge that we have in the video game space or in our space is that there's the gaming space in itself is a very toxic space, unfortunately. Although people think of video games, fun, all fun. No, it's not. There's a lot of toxic behavior, a lot of trolling. And so if we can do something about that using whatever Web 5 is for that would be amazing. And identity protection in the web is important. But specifically, I think there is a way to work this into a construct where if you misbehave, you can be clearly identified. And maybe that's cool. The way forward.
Yeah, that's cool. Can I just say something on that?
Please.
So in 2017, on the impact, I love what you just ended with. So in 2017, we started a company called Blockchain for Change, and on that, it was on distributed ledger. So it was if there's any New Yorkers here, the Robin Hood Foundation, if you all know them. So I went to go speak to their board, and I drew 4 squares. And I said, top left square, the government says something's an issue. Top right, people with money throw money at that issue. Bottom left, executive directors, CEOs, program officers, often doctor their Salesforce data saying they're solving that issue. On the bottom right, put a big red X to the people receiving those services. As someone personally who grew up in and out of homeless shelters and lack of housing in Newark, New Jersey, there was a shout to Newark people coming here. I never had the capability to say, I got those 60 days of shelter, I got those 90 days of mental health counseling, I got that food, and yes, it actually helped me. So they said, how are you gonna do this? I said, build an underlying layer on distributed technology, onboard these organizations, and if they hide from it, they have something to hide. Give the users that validation. So I love what you said. If that's Web 5, amazing.
I'm so glad you brought that up because as you were all speaking initially, the first thing that I thought of, and we could see the correlation to when social media really took off in 2008 to where we are now and what teen suicide rates look like and mental health, absolutely. And I'm begging you guys, I have 2 teenage kids. That has to absolutely be part of what you're focusing on as well. And to your point, gaming and any other social platform is going to have that. But I am so glad that you brought up mental health and being aware of that. I think it's a positive thing because we're at that point where the industry is willing to talk about it, and that's a good thing, addressing those issues. So thank you, Josh and Jan. Who's up next?
Hey, Jan.
Identity. I want to know who people are.
So I'm Tyler Stanball. I actually work with Josh on a couple ventures, but I actually have a question for Jan because I'm a big gamer also. Gaming community is very toxic. They've been very outspoken about NFTs, very angry about it. There's been microtransactions and all this other kind of stuff that they've gotten their wool pulled over their eyes. How do you think you can get past that kind of core gamer hate of NFTs? Because let's be honest, a skin in Fortnite is an NFT. It's just a skin that you rent when you're in the game, basically, right? Like an NFT rent. So how do you think we can open up people's eyes and show them that it's not just another ploy to take the money?
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. I love this question. Yeah, you're absolutely right. The gaming community hates NFTs, right? For good reason. But the majority, and I don't even think that the majority of NFT project creators thought of this in the first place to make it a money grab, a cash grab, or a Ponzi scheme, but they just didn't understand how games work, right? You can't just take a 2D image and put it in a game as a character. It just doesn't work. So the way we want to overcome this is really by instilling trust, changing the vernacular around this, and definitely also going in there and say okay, the example of what you also just gave as a gamer, I always tell the people, if you play World of Warcraft for the last 10 years, you probably spend a good amount of thousands of hours in there, thousands of dollars in there. Got to prove here. And so if Activision decides to shut this down, it's all gone. You own nothing, right? So with that technology, and I don't want to even call it NFTs, with that technology, with that decentralized DLC, the downloadable content, that is yours now. If they shut it down, then it's still yours. You can sell it. As back in the days you did at GameStop. You bought a game and you played it, you finished it, you brought it back and just got a couple of bucks for it. Or you sold it to a friend. So that's the underlying idea there. Now we have the technology to make this happen. It is called NFTs and blockchain right now. We'll soon see how it's called in the future. But that's exactly the path forward. And what we plan to do is actually to break down the barrier even further and drop a ton of NFTs for free into the market. Just have them have it, play with it. If you want to sell it, it's all yours, right? Let the market determine what they will get for it. But it's free, it's yours. It doesn't need to be randomized and it doesn't need to be unique. It's your character. You can play it, you can upgrade it, you can own it, and whatever you want to do with it. And so I think that's the way to really instill trust, because they will see, hey, we're not there for the money grab. We're there to have you play our games and own the characters. And then the future is wide open for what else you can do with that. Thanks for the question.
Any other questions for us? Oh, right over here.
This might be a boring question, but what are some of the technical barriers to doing some of the things that you're talking about? I mean, I always think of the analogy with the internet in 1998 and kind of you had to be on the computer or the phone and the buffering and everything like that. You never would have envisioned streaming. So how far are we on kind of the back end tech development to get to kind of the world that you're envisioning with this?
Can you say who you are?
Oh, yes, I'm Lindsay and I'm with Galaxy.
That's okay.
Thank you, Josh.
And a friend of Josh.
And then Josh and
So, thank you for the question, Lindsay. So, very far ahead. I think the challenge that we see in the majority of the Web3 space games, right, the blockchain games, is that everything sits on blockchain. So that's a bottleneck. And so, where we come from in our world, everything that you own in the gaming space sits on a gaming server, right? So there's a construct that we have built. We call it, based on our DNA and where we all come from here, we call it the purpose verse, which is our metaverse solution. And in the purpose verse, you have an owner account. And in that, your centralized inventory system sits. So you don't need to have a constant connection to the blockchain. You purchase your first asset, second asset, third, and everything is stored in your wallet, in your purpose verse account, which is basically your game server. Only if you then plan to resell it, that's where you go out again and connect the whole system.
I think in terms of the technology question as well, I worked at a company called Tapjoy over 10 years ago, and they basically invented virtual currency on mobile gaming. And so we had 1 billion people playing games across the world using our platform. It was non-fungible currencies, so you couldn't move it between EA and Atari and things like that own on the publisher side. And I think that was part of this whole philosophy around gaming, right? Like, you don't own it, it dies within that game, you'd spend a bunch of money, it'd be ad-supported or in-app purchase, and that worked for a period of time, but people just got sick of that. I think what we're seeing now, and shout out to the fellow Aussies in Immutable X, is what they're building is an incredible sort of layer there. And I think it borrows as well heavily from the idea of ticketing, right? Like, you buy a ticket to see a concert, you can't go. How do you get rid of that? You've got to use secondary ticketing, and that's a big aspect for it, but it can be gouged, and bots can buy the tickets, and it becomes a huge problem. But secondary markets and being able to have a non-fungible asset that has an individual price and it can be traded, I think, is just such a massive part of it. The technology has existed in a centralized Web2 world for over a decade. It's just now that the blockchain is sort of enabling it, and particularly, with Starknet, with Immutable, and enabling these games and these publishers to take off with AAA gaming. I think we're just sort of hitting that, and it's all about the cryptography, security. It took a long time for us to get there, but the theory was there. We sort of knew where the demand was. We knew what people would want, and then I think establishing trust around, not diminishing those things and not having people get rugged all the time through these terrible projects. It's like integrity still matters, and accountability is something that I think we really need to sort of seek in this space.
All right, cool. We have time for one more question. Come on, save the best for last.
I have one.
Oh, yeah.
So I'm Lana, and I helped produce this, but I wanted to give a shout out to the consulates that are here in the office of the mayor, partially because we brought you here because there's companies here and organizations from different areas of the world. And so I'm kind of curious for everybody in the room, it sounds like you're leapfrogging a little bit in Australia. And so how does all this fit into the context of the global regulatory system and financial markets?
Yeah, I think that's it's a live question. I was at a breakfast in Austin a couple of weeks ago with the Blockchain Association, and Senator Lummis was there, and incredibly generous with her time and talking about this stuff. I think what's happening here is interesting. I think there's a lot of different ideas and approaches. Where we've sort of ended up in Australia, at least on the journey anyway, is a pretty aggressive stance, and I think we need to do that as a country anyway. Is we need good digital paying jobs. We're in a very competitive part of the world. A lot of companies that were in this digital space were in Australia and they left and they went to Singapore. Everybody knows Singapore. It's the gateway to Asia. It's, there's a huge opportunity. Well, we want that opportunity and we want to create those jobs in Australia, and we need people to start to step in. And so we're seeing that lean in. There's a lot of new thinking and approaches there, and it's getting competitive. The UK have leaned in on this, and it's now becoming a thing where it's like, we're not scared of it anymore. We understand it. We've been observing it. We've had people researching it, people talking about it. We're no longer fearful. It's just, how do we do something that doesn't stifle the innovation, but puts up consumer protections and holds people accountable? And we've seen just in recent events over the last few weeks, just terrible events occurring where it's just decimating people's savings in these crypto things, just because people are greedy and unaccountable to these actions. And that's got to change. And so I think having government lean in around sort of regulatory conversations is important, because once that credibility is established and once the rule set and the sand pits are sort of established for us to keep this innovation going, I think that's going to be where we start to see things take off. And institutions are on the side, they're watching it. Some of them are already in there. Talking to people like Fidelity is already in here doing stuff. Like, the credibility is there and people have got this technology. But again, it's going to come to just consumer protection. I think that's ultimately what regulation's about. It is getting rid of the worst actors first and then sort of setting some clear constructs that don't limit the innovation.
It's on a kind of like cool question. So us at Civics Unplugged and DreamDAO, right? 77 different countries with our traditional M&T banking, we can't pay most of them, right? So how do we pay them? We pay them through crypto. We set up wallets. And I never thought this sentence would come out of my mouth, but I'm really excited to be working with the IRS. Willfully. So the IRS, came to us because I have a friend who's high up in running the digital currency division, and they took, Caitlin, welcome back from Italy. So they saw what we were doing in a transparent way. And they're like, oh my gosh, can we learn? So they're smart in two different ways. One, it was amazing. A bunch of kids sitting around setting up major agents from the IRS with their ENS name, like setting up MetaMask, showed them what Uniswap was, like right when they thought they knew what they were talking about. But also they were like, wow, we need to recruit these young folks to actually work for the IRS. And they started talking about a whole different way of like with civil services, right? Like this could be a fractionalized way of how these young folks like make this part of their career. So that was a really interesting moment that was coming together.
Yeah, so I have to say, if nobody guessed it, I'm the German part here of this group. I am very grateful for the support that we have here from the German Consul General, because there's a reason why I'm here, not in Berlin. The reason is, quite frankly, because when I ventured out back then and just proposed a video game company, the German Deutsche Bank would come back. It's like, Mr. Roessner, yeah, we can give you a loan for a bakery, but yeah, we don't really understand the video game space. Like, okay. So I went to New York, built my first gaming company, and now I'm in the web3 space. So it's incredible to see the support really from the consulate there. And it's really incredible because they are coming to us, looking what we are doing, and basically reporting it back to Germany. So like, guys, you need to watch this. We need to bring this back. We need to support innovation, as we Germans are, historically always a little bit risk averse. And Wolfram, I think you want to say something?
I have to take this up. Thanks. Great question, by the way. I just want to say it's a different mood here also compared to another conference, a blockchain conference, where I was more uptown, more in the Upper East Side with more older crowd, I would say. And they, just a couple of weeks ago, and they were basically anti-regulation. They completely dismissed the concept. They thought it's just something that blocks innovation. I don't subscribe to this point of view here, and I'm very glad actually that you guys, and hopefully you guys, are share this point of view. You need smart regulation, you need a regulation that doesn't stop innovation, but you need it also to create a market, to create basically buy-in of a larger crowd, basically. The specialists buy in early and don't need that. But if you want to really reach the broader public, if you want to go beyond the tech work at the buzzword, then you need regulation, because that makes it understandable and that gives security and safety for the guys and the girls on the street who want to buy into that. So thank you for that approach, and a different approach than the more established crowd in the Upper East Side, basically.
Thank you so much. And I think you all made very valid points here, regardless if it's the older crowd on the Upper East Side or Gen Z or the next up and coming generation. We all talk about reskilling the workforce and how important that is. And the question's always been, that's my sign. I'm wrapping up, I promise. But that's something we can all understand when it comes to education, whether it's traditional college, or we go to trade schools, we go to technical schools, but reskilling the workforce, this is how we work with AI and machine learning and all the Web3 technologies. This is how it's done, and everybody gets that on an economic level. So I want to thank everyone for joining us here today. Of course, the New York City Mayor's Office, our German, British, and Australian consulates, thank you so much for the honor of joining us. And of course, the 4 Js, we have Jan, Jake, and Josh. Thank you so much for the insight. It was great to meet you.